Hello, you're listening to Recalibrate and Go, a podcast brought to you by Aptude. I'm your host, Michael Foster. Hello, listeners. We're learning a lot about podcasting. Everything you've heard so far, from episode 1 to episode 8, we recorded the first week of April. And we had such wonderful conversations that we ended up taking the segments and splitting them up into 15 to 20 minute chunks. Something a little easier to digest. That's because we're throwing so much knowledge at you. We don't want your brains to explode. We got to make sure that you have the capacity to retain all that's coming at you. So, part 2 of our conversation with Jack Recinto. We were discussing how difficult it can be to take your old legacy system and then migrate that into something much more modern. You've been hearing it on the news. A lot of government, state, local mainframes, they're still working off of COBOL, and they're in desperate need of programmers who know ancient computer languages. And maybe it's time everybody takes a good hard look at what they're doing and make that decision to upgrade. So part 1, we were discussing the stigmata against putting everything up on the cloud. And we wrap up the conversation here in part 2. Jack will then give us his 10-step program, idea, concept, whatever you want to call it, on what you need to keep in mind when you're migrating from an old system to a new one. It's outstanding. It takes a lot of information and condenses it into something you can digest, which is what we do here. It's Recalibrate and Go. Jack Recinto, let's go. And I totally get that. And then I respect that. Even just from like my music library, I had iTunes and I always bought my songs for 99 cents, you know.
Right.
And then you know, everybody started going to cloud, and I was, why would I do that? I want to own my file. Like,
right.
Still, and maybe that was just our generation, because we were the generation that had to drive to music stores to get music. There was
Right.
still that sense of, I own my data, I have my data.
Yep.
And now that's definitely become just less of a thing. It's
Yeah.
just the best way to put it. It's like,
Right.
I've been on Google Music now for 3 years, and it's like, okay, this is great. But I do remember I was on this thing called RDIO. They were one of the original music streaming services, and then they went out of business, and it was like, oh my God, I lost all my playlists. And I think that fear of not having something tangible, not having the file and something you own, I think for especially a lot of people who are older, that's frightening. I mean, I totally get it.
Is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to knock anybody who was like, I don't want to go on the cloud. I mean, I totally understand why that was in many ways nerve-wracking. And getting back to the big question, 6 months from now, what does this look like? So if you're a company that has to move, you have to, that you're bursting at the seams. The technology, the legacy system you got is not going to cut it. What do you tell them? What do they need to do?
I usually have kind of like a 10-step program for things like that, because basically it's going to take a plan in order to have this. So step 1 usually for me is have a plan. You got to understand what you're trying to accomplish. Is it a single system you're replacing? Is it a system that reaches out to multiple systems that is going to take a lot more work? Understanding exactly what you're trying to accomplish and having that goal and maybe working backwards from that goal is the ideal, because what you do is you slowly start from that solution and slowly work your way to where you are now, so you understand how you get from point B to point A, basically, so that you're looking at everything that needs to be done in order to handle what you need to do when you're replacing this system. Step 2 would be gathering up all of the necessary requirements. You got to understand why you're actually doing this move. Is it a compliance issue? Are you out of compliance because you're not getting support, or legally you have to move, or something like that? That's a really important question. Or is it a business model change? Has the way that the business is run changed, so now you have to change your technology to help accommodate some of that? Or is it just a process improvement? You're looking to upgrade. Understanding these goals is what really makes you move forward and what gets the requirements that you need to make sure that your project's going to be a success. Because if you're going to put in the time and the money to actually move your system to a new system or upgrade your system, you want to make sure that you're going to be getting that return on investment. And the only way you can do that is by having a goal that you can actually achieve.
Right.
The third step is to review the potential systems and make sure that they can meet your requirements, but also expand to encompass the future needs. So you want to make sure that the system is customizable so that you can actually do what you need to do to make sure that you stay relevant and that you're not looking to upgrade this another 5 years from now or into a new system or something. You want to make sure that you can do what you need to do with it now, but also have the open mind to say, this is where we're going 5 years from now. Will this system be able to accomplish that? You also want to make sure that it has the ability to integrate with all the other systems if that's what you're doing, because it doesn't really help you if you cut off ties with all your other systems that were once supported by your legacy system, and now you've got a completely separate system that doesn't accomplish everything you need at that point. So that's something that you just have to keep in mind while you're working through this. Number 4 is assemble your team. In those particular cases, we'll work with something really small. The 4 major players in this team are your project manager, your developers, your testers, and your implementers at that point. And that might be the same person for some companies, but you want to make sure that you have somebody who will oversee each one of those steps while your project is taking place, just to make sure that everybody stays on task, all of the requirements are being met, the system's being tested correctly and is working the way that you need it to, and when it's implemented, it's going to be out there for everyone to access without hopefully any issue. Number 5 is death by 1,000 cuts. Don't allow scope creep to come in and start moving.
I totally get it.
No, exactly. I mean, that's what happens. Once you start getting things going and you get your business users in and they're taking a look at it and they're like, this is great, but can it do that? If you're going to be that yes man and say, hey, yeah, sure, yeah, we can do that, then by the time you start collecting all that information, you've got a brand new project. Plan appropriately, and if something is missed that will be needed right then and there, then yes, you should add it in because it's a mission critical type success factor. But if it's not, my go-to is always, yep, you know what, actually that's going in version 2. So make sure that you're flexible enough to say, okay, we'll triage this. We can do this in a later upgrade, but at this point, this is where we need to be to get this system out.
And by the way, everything you're saying about planning, and everyone always says it, we know it's important, but you can never overemphasize it, because I think it's one of those things where it's like, we need a plan. And then you keep saying it, hoping that you plan even more than how many times you've said you need to plan. Because in working in web design and working with people, if you don't have all your directives and everything in place before you even write one line of code, the project can go off the rails.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Failing to plan is planning to fail, and that's exactly how it goes.
Time for a break. Sometimes the time difference with offshore talent can be a positive, especially when that team is covering 24/7, 365 support services. But for other pressing initiatives, you'll want to have support that's working at the same time your onshore team is in the office. Aptude's team in Mexico City can cover all American time zones far more readily than resources across the globe. No more waiting for an afternoon phone call. You can have access to your team when you need it most. Nearshore services. Learn more today at aptude.com.
Step 6 is test it. Make sure that you test the program thoroughly, because if you're putting something out that's not going to work, then it's not going to impress the administration, and it's certainly not going to impress the users that are going to be using it. So you want to make sure that you've got a champion in there who enjoys it and is saying, yes, you know what, they're doing what they said. They're making sure that we're getting what we need. And having those champions are pivotal, and that leads us into step 7, which is a pilot group. You want to make sure you get a group of savvy users who are in there to kind of test it out and to use it and to let you know what's great and what's not so great. And you want to turn them into evangelists so that when they go out into the general public of the company, they're going to turn around and say, hey, we're expecting a big change, but you know what? I've seen it and it's really good. Having those community champions is pivotal to the success of user acceptance. And that's kind of like the end all be all, because right away, once you get this application out, if you get everybody emailing your CEO or your COO or your CIO or whoever is running your business at that point, they're going to just hear all these complaints and they're going to say, wow, this was a huge mistake. We need to think about rolling back or something. And that's just a situation you don't want to be in. So having user evangelists who can go out before you actually put this out and start getting people to drink the Kool-Aid, if you will, is really pivotal to the success of your overall project.
No, gotcha.
Deployment is the next step, and of course that is the major step because that's going to be going out to all your users and that's going to be what your end product is. So you want to make sure that it's planned accordingly, probably done outside of business hours so that it doesn't impact people who are currently working. It all depends on the system as well. And then just making sure that you have boots on the ground, if you will, in certain situations. I mean, currently that's no longer available, but you want to make sure that your support staff is well schooled and they're able to answer questions right away. And you want to make sure that communication has gone out, usually putting out frequently asked questions or some sort of quick reference guide. Those are important because those are what's going to really help the users feel like they've got the support with this new system that you're putting them into. And then, of course, step 10 is start all over because basically, as you said, technology doesn't last very long nowadays. So, of course, this is going to be a moving, living project. Even if you're not moving to a new system, you're going to be looking into putting in those requests that people have asked for in the version 2 and stuff. When you get all those additional pieces, you start looking them over and you're like, okay, this needs to go into version 2, or we need to make these changes for version 3. So having that foresight and scoping it all out will just help you to keep these projects in control so that as you move forward and you continue to upgrade, you never get back into that step where you haven't touched the system in 10 years and you're crossing your fingers and hoping it won't go down.
I think there was a time period, and I remember reading this article recently. They talked about the movie Dr. No, and the guy who was the art director for that film, they forgot to put his name in the title sequence, in the credits. And in those days, it was I think they came out in 1962. That was a month or two long process, and they were on a really tight budget. So instead, they gave the guy a gold pen or something like that. Just like, but because nowadays we just assume, oh, well, it's just a quick change, right? Obviously, for people who really don't understand how technology works, as you know, I always say it's a 5 second, a 5 minute, a 5 hour, 5 days, 5 weeks. And
right.
Each change could logarithmically skew the project. And people who don't know tech or don't know how it works, it's very hard for someone to know if a change is going to literally rewrite the entire system or if it is just a quick fix.
Exactly. And it's those concerns you want to meet both on an administrative level with your leadership and on a user level with the people who are going to be using the system day to day. And if you can do that, then you've already gotten your business acceptance and you've already made your job and your life probably 50% easier than it would have been had you just not engaged in.
Jack Recinto, just a wealth of knowledge. You really know how to spell it out for people. Jack, we'd love to have you back. Can we have you back, Jack? Okay.
Of course.
Yeah. Special thanks once again to Jack Recinto. He's currently the Senior Applications Developer at Vedder Price. He's a IT leader with extensive experience in designing and implementing global enterprise-level applications. Today we were talking about what it takes, a 10-step program, if you will, on how to migrate your legacy system into something more modern. I've never imagined something that complex can be described in such wonderful bite-sized morsels. I actually know what to do now, and I don't even work necessarily in programming or tech. I'm the art director at Aptude. I'm the art guy, not the smart guy. I leave all that stuff to the smart guys. And yet, thanks to Jack, I kind of have a better idea as to what is all involved. I think everybody gets it now. I mean, I know I do. We're going to be back with more podcasts. We got a lot more guests coming up. We're going to be talking about Power BI, Power Apps, UI UX design. We're going to cover a lot of ground. We might even have a special segment where I talk to a good friend of mine. We're writing a book together, and it's going to be about how cyberpunk films in the 80s and 90s changed the way we view technology today. It's going to be really exciting. A little bit off the beaten path, but that's what we do here. We like to look at technology from all angles, and we really appreciate you listening to us. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on our blog. We got videos. We got online seminars coming. It's going to be a very, very busy time, and thanks for being with us. This is Recalibrate and Go, brought to you by Aptude.